This is Citizen Weekend with Olive Barrows.
A very good evening to you. Welcome to Citizen Weekend. Tonight we look at the security situation in the region. I'll be joined by Dr. Fatma Ahmed Ali, who is an Associate Professor of International Relations, and Dr. Hassan Kanenje, who is the Director of the Horn Institute. But as is the custom, before we get into matters, South Sudan, Rwanda, Sudan, Somalia, DRC, let's take a look at the highlights.
These Supreme Court judges have gone to High Court judges. These are people they supervise. These are people they transfer.
You are fostering impunity. Former Cabinet Secretary Raphael Tuju writes to Chief Justice Martha Koome, accusing her of leading a compromised apex court.
Ukulima wakikosa ile ya serikali ya subsidy itaongeza gharama na 40%.
The cost of poor planning. Farmers decry fertilizer shortage as government assures them of availability.
Sasa imekuwa sio ng'ombe. Leo mshaa Likijira amepigwa kwake tu bila hata ng'ombe. Ameuawa kwake. Mama mwingine jinsi tena akapigwa hapa risasi.
A chief and a former administrator among victims of banditry in Baringo and Samburu. Showdown in Nairobi. Harambee Stars prepare for Sunday's must-win encounter against Gambia in a 2026 World Cup qualifier.
Tonight, our sign language interpreter is Belinda Phillips. Former Cabinet Secretary, Cabinet Minister then, Raphael Tuju, has accused the Supreme Court judges of bias and irresponsibility in handling key cases. In a letter addressed to the Chief Justice, Martha Koome, Tuju cited the conduct of the judges in handling cases involving Dari Limited. Tuju questioned the impartiality of some Supreme Court judges, alleging they have engaged in public discourse on active cases before the High Court and the Judicial Service Commission. And as you'll hear now from Stephen Leto, the letter to the Chief Justice adds to a growing list of judicial complaints against the Supreme Court judges.
Raphael Tuju has gone all out, taking the war to the doorstep of Chief Justice Martha Koome. Tuju cited personal concerns ranging from the conduct of the Supreme Court bench to matters of national security. In the 4-page letter to the Chief Justice, Tuju says in part that the Supreme Court judges are behaving as if they are infallible, discussing matters in public that are before the High Court and JSC. What should mere mortals like me do when they do this, end quote, while noting to the CJ that the actions of her bench undermine judicial integrity. The letter tore into the court's handling of the 2022 presidential petition, arguing that its dismissal used inappropriate language that inflamed an already divided nation. He specifically took issue with the court's reference to the petition against the election as hot air and a wild goose chase.
I've written to the Chief Justice. I expect a response. And if I don't get a response, we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Tuju protested and told the CJ that the Apex Court, the Supreme Court of Kenya judges, must bear the responsibility of carrying out their duties with wisdom, sensitivity, uphold the rule of law, ensure fair trial, and protect the Constitution.
How can we have people at that level being able to abuse their positions in that way? What kind of country are we bequeathing the next generation?
According to the letter, the Chief Justice is overseeing a near-dysfunctional judicial system, with the top judges misusing the lower courts to trade impunity. The letter notes that, quote, when Supreme Court judges attempt to stop proceedings at the JSC, then it can only mean that they want a license of impunity. They should respect the laws of the land and constitutional bodies like JSC.
These Supreme Court judges have gone to High Court judges. These are people they supervise. These are people they transfer. These are people they can punish. How can they actually go to them to decide whether to hear this case or not? And they don't want to be at the JSC where their peers are. the Supreme Court, the judiciary is represented in the JSC. And guess who is the chairperson? It is the Chief Justice.
The letter cited the handling of the Tuju current estate, a protracted legal combat that landed at the Supreme Court. Tuju notes that none of my current lands are grabbed public land. Neither is any of them, both from proceeds of crime or money stolen from public coffers. It is these lands now that various vultures are circulating over, trying to grab them at any cost. End quote.
I complained to them that they cannot make a ruling that I should be executed, and in case they are wrong, at the end of my case, then I can be compensated. If that can be done to me, I've held senior positions in this country. What about the hapless people?
He says the judges have since rescued themselves from the Dari land matter. In a lecture at the University of Embu, Supreme Court Judge Isaac Lenaula defended Kenya's highest court from a perceived mob justice campaign on the Supreme Court judges, illustrated by a myriad of petitions.
We are therefore lucky in Kenya that we have institutions of the Constitution that are holding our democracy together. And one of those institutions, I submit to you, is the Supreme Court of Kenya. And therefore, forget what people are saying about the Supreme Court without evidence.
In direct response to a petition to remove Supreme Court judges, Lenaula strongly defended the judiciary, warning that such efforts will weaken Kenya's democracy. Stephen Leto, Citizen TV.
As the end of the planting season fast approaches, desperate farmers continue to camp at NCPB stores around the country, hoping that the government has sent more fertilizer, even as those already tired of looking for the subsidized commodity opt to buy from retail outlets at 6,000 shillings per bag. The farmers' struggle comes even as the government, through the Agriculture Ministry, assured them that they would get the commodity undertaking to deliver over 1 million bags to NCPB stores across the country from Monday, citing logistical challenges as the main reason for the late distribution. Take a look at this report by Kamal Mwangi.
It is a rush against time at Ken Korir's farm in Chepsoin, Kericho County, as he rushes to have his seed planted before the planting season lapses. He says he had delayed planting while waiting for the government-subsidized fertilizer, only to give up after making numerous trips to NCPB stores in Kericho, finally opting to buy from retail at a price of 6,000 Kenya shillings, more than double the price had he bought from government.
Hata saizi wanasema ni weekend, haisi peana mpaka Monday na saizi tunapanda. Sasa tunahangaika kuliko tungoje mpaka Monday. Tukaona ni heri tununue hii ya duka hii ya bei kali tupande juu hii wakati unaenda.
Jonathan Meli, a maize farmer in Trans Nzoia County, has opted for the retail DAP fertilizer, critical at planting. He says failure by government to send to stores enough planting fertilizer will create a ripple effect in the market, as farmers will seek prices commensurate to their cost of production.
Kosekana na mbolea ya subsidy ya serikali itaongeza cost of production by 40%, kwa sababu unapata mbolea kwa duka sahi ni 5,500 kwa gunia ya kilo 50. Sasa wasipouza mahindi zaidi ya shilingi 5,000 kwa gunia ya kilo 90, basi wataenda hasara, kwa sababu kurudisha hiyo wakiuza mahindi na bei ya shilingi 3,500 itakuwa vigumu kurudisha gharama ya hiyo mbolea.
For those that are still hopeful of getting the subsidized fertilizer, Saturday was yet another day to camp at NCPB stores. Never mind, they do not open on weekends, showing just how desperate farmers are for this commodity that in its absence would affect their output in the next 4 months. Those that have already given up, opting to plant and supplement their crop with the top-dressing fertilizer.
Siro nitaka nifungue kuanzia asubuhi mpaka saa 6. Ndio masaa mimi najua serikali inafanyanga kazi. Leo ni Jumamosi. Sasa unaona tena nimepata gharama kutoka mpaka penye naishi, ambapo ni kazi ngumu sana.
Sasa kama kwa sheria hakuna mbolea, simi nitapanda bure. Halafu nitamweka amoni. Nitatafuta amoni ni mwake.
Tukipanda bila mbolea, hata kumea itaonekana, inaanza kuwa yellow. Hata unaona inaonekana nikaa kimeshikwa na ugonjwa. Sasa hakuna hacha upande.
The government, through Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Mutahi Kagwe, says the empty racks in NCPB stores have been occasioned by logistical challenges that have since been resolved, and farmers should check NCPB stores on Monday, as over 1 million bags of DAP fertilizer shall have been delivered at their doorstep. CS Kagwe's statement continues to say that the government has procured an additional 1,380 metric tons of planting fertilizer, and that the government has engaged the services of cargo trains to ensure quick delivery. Kamau Mwangi, Citizen TV.
3 people have died in 3 separate bandit attacks in Samburu West, Samburu Central and Baringo North sub-counties in Samburu and Baringo counties in less than 24 hours. Rift Valley Regional Police Commander Jasper Mbati has called on the public to remain calm as security agencies move in to restore normalcy in the area. Marianne Nyambura has the details.
Tension is brewing in Pura Village, Samburu West and in Samburu Central. Hours after 2 people, a former chief and a resident, were shot by armed bandits who continue to rain terror.
Leo tumepoteza tena mzee ambaye jana alipeleka mtoto wake mwenye alipigwa risasi last week hospitali jana. Nilikuwa na yeye hapa mara akipeleka huyo kijana yake atolewe Mausi. Akirudisha huyo mtoto nyumbani leo asubuhi yeye akauliwa. Of which that's not good. Siku sasa imekuwa sio ng'ombe. Leo mshaa Ligigiri amepigwa kwake tu bila hata ng'ombe. Ameuawa kwake. Mama mwingine jinsi tena akapigwa hapa risasi. Kwani watu wanataka nini? Serikali ya Ruto inataka nini? Wapi Murkomen? Murkomen amelala kwa darasa.
In Ngaratuko, Kagir and Yatia villages in Baringo North sub-county, locals are also witnessing regular flare-ups. The Loruk location chief was shot and killed as security teams who are trying to recover stolen livestock within Loya Morok clashed with bandits.
The sub-county criminal investigation officer, Tiati East, visited the scene. He collected a number of cartridges, spent cartridges, which are very essential and critical in our investigations. And also recorded several statements from potential witnesses.
Regional police teams have pitched camp in the affected areas to restore peace.
Yeah, we are smarting out of the height of drought. And because of this drought, there were a lot of movement of animals and people. And in that process, we have witnessed a number of cases. But we have also made huge efforts to make sure that the situation does not get out of hand.
Head of Public Service Felix Koske, who was speaking during a Thanksgiving service in Baringo, says criminal activities in the North Rift must come to an end.
Tutaendelea kukalia hii area mpaka amani idumu na iwe tradition yetu area hii. President ametoa amri, alisema kama mnataka hapa ifanywe army barracks atatuma askari wote. Alisema Jamalingon atatuma hapa mpaka tujenge even barracks hapa na training ground. Kwa sababu ya nini? Kwa sababu tunataka Tiati iendelee kama sehemu zingine za Kenya hii.
Miriam Nyambura, Citizen TV.
A gang of criminal youth in Msambweni, Kwale County, went on the rampage on Saturday, stabbing several residents and robbing businesses in broad daylight. The machete-wielding gang, referred to as Panga Boys, is reported to have stepped out under the guise of protesting the killing of a 29-year-old man who was stabbed on Friday, only to take advantage of the protest and advance their criminal acts. Safin Acheng Uma with details of this latest incident that points to a concerning trend of resurgence of criminal gangs in the coast.
This amateur video footage clearly shows how a group of young people stormed and robbed several businesses in Msambweni, Kwale County in broad daylight on Saturday, escalating tension in the area. The fearless machete-wielding gang popularly known as Panga Boys, is known for terrorizing residents by way of a spate of criminal activities. Brivian Simiu, a journalist from the region, is among their latest victims.
Wakati nimetoka kazini shughuli zangu sehemu za Msambweni nikafika Diani, nikiwa barabarani nilikutana na kikundi cha vijana ya watu kama nafikiri 6 hivi. So immediately tu nimekaribiana nao hivi, huyo wa kwanza akatoa panga. Kutoa panga mimi nikajaribu kukimbia on the other side, nikaanguka. Ile kuanguka nikaanza kupiga nduru, nikashtukizia tu amenikata sikio.
The gang is reported to have taken to the streets under the guise of protesting the killing of a 29-year-old man who was stabbed on Friday, only to take advantage of the protest to advance their criminal acts.
Wakakuja wengine wamevaa ninja, wengine few walikuwa wako hivyo tu. Wakashikia msichana wangu kisu, wakazi, wakampiga teke, wakamwambia fungua counter ama tukuue.
This latest incident points to a concerning trend of the resurgence of criminal gangs in the coastal region. This CCTV footage shows how a criminal gang tactfully forced their entry into a shop in Likoni recently and stole several items which they loaded in bags. One of the businessmen in the region reported having lost 500,000 Kenyan shillings in the robbery spree, with the traders calling on the government to act swiftly.
Jamani, biashara yetu sasa tumefunga. Hatuwezi tukisikia mapanga tuwakimbia. Tukisikia wapi tuwakimbia. Yaani mpaka sasa hizi ukitembea barabarani roho yako waishika kama uishikilia sijui nini. Kisa ni vitoto vidogo vilivyozaliwa juzi. Serikali jameni, mko wapi?
Coast Regional Police Commander Ali Nuno has confirmed that 3 suspects are in custody and more security officers have been deployed to tame the insecurity situation.
So they are taken to Kwale police station. The security situation generally is calm. I'm on the ground and I want to assure Kenyans that their safety and security will be taken into consideration. There is no reason for why there is no tension. The security situation is calm so far. Today there was a funeral and some boys misbehaved in the funeral when they are coming out of the funeral, and still we were able to take them.
Safin Acheng Omar, Citizen TV.
Detectives at Embakasi police station are searching for 2 men who are said to have lured a young woman from her home before sexually assaulting her and strangling her to death. In this latest and disturbing case of femicide, police say the suspect used another woman who is in their custody to lay a trap for the deceased before committing the offence under the cover of darkness. Crime reporter Franklin Wala visited the crime scene and filed this report on what could have happened.
On the 18th of February, the lifeless body of Naomi Wangari Mwangi was found lying dead in the night at this scene. The 29-year-old had been killed in cold blood. Witnesses recount seeing unknown men fight the woman to the ground as they sexually assaulted her.
Nimeonea tu pale. Majirani wako hapa. Kuna mtu amelala wapi? Amelala hapa. Nakuja nikiwauliza ni nini. Sasa ujirani alipiga nduru sasa. Akatuambia, msichana nilikuwa kuna mali nilikuwa nachungulia, nimeona vijana wawili. Kuna kijana alikuwa amesimama pale. Na mwingine ule alikuwa anafanya nini? Kuna ule alikuwa anamrepa akiwa hapa.
Witnesses say they heard Naomi's cries for help. They rushed to the scene only to encounter the victim's cold body, half naked. The killers had disappeared into the darkness.
Jirani moja alikuja tu, akakuja, akanionyesha ati kichwa ndio hii ya mtoto yako. Na alikuwa amelala hivi na mkono. Na wakati alikuwa ananyongwa akilia akipika nduru, nikaonyesha jirani mwenye nyumba hiyo, ndiye alikuja akalinga mawe. Alipolinga au watu wakakimbia.
Police were notified and collected the body to the city mortuary as they informed the next of kin.
Tulimpata alikuwa ameface the other side, so askari walimgeuza this side. So hapa kwa shingo alikuwa na bruise. So hatujui kama ni kumnyonga ama walimchapa na object ama walifanya nini.
The victim's husband, who was not at home, says Naomi received a phone call from someone and she left the house, leaving 9-year-old daughter at home. When the husband arrived from work, he could not find Naomi.
Mimi nikarudi kwa nyumba kujiekelea.
So kujiekelea kidogo kufika saa 9 naona nashtuka kitu nanishtua kwa ndoto. Ni kama hizo ndio masaa mke wangu alikuwa anakata roho ama ni nini. Ni sura ilinikujia kabisa, mimi naona watu wanangangana na hao watu ni kama tawana nguo, imagine hiyo time. Nikashtuka hata nikasweat. Kuamka kuangalia kitanda sioni mtu na naona mtoto peke yake amelala.
A neighbor came knocking later with the bad news. His wife had been murdered.
Wakaniambia tumepata bibi yako amewawa na mwili umechukuliwa na askari. Hata sikuongea mengi. Niliingia kwa nyumba, nikabadilisha, nikavaa jumper, kaenda station ku confirm your message.
Investigators later arrested a female friend who was in contact with the deceased before her killing. Police say the suspect was seen with the deceased alongside 2 male adults moments before the murder. An autopsy has confirmed that Naomi died as a result of strangulation and that her killer sexually assaulted her. Franklin Wala, Citizen TV.
48 Kenyans who were rescued in Myanmar have arrived in the country, leaving 77 more waiting repatriation. The 48 who landed at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport at 6 a.m. this morning aboard a Kenya Airways flight were taken by government multi-agency team for a debrief, I beg your pardon. And as Emily Chebet reports, 36 more Kenyans are expected to be repatriated soon. And this is after their list was verified by Kenya's embassy in Thailand as having successfully undergone biometric processing.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs received the 48 Kenyans rescued from Myanmar, the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport at 6 a.m. on Saturday. The Kenyan ambassador to Thailand, Lindsay Kiptines, said embassy officials in Thailand received the rescued Kenyans at the Friendship Bridge 2 on the Thailand-Myanmar border on Friday morning before taking them to Thailand's Bangkok airport. Our efforts to speak to the returnees in Nairobi were futile. A multi-agency team informed Citizen TV that they were going through medical and security checks before they are released back to their families. Officials also saying some of the returnees were in poor condition. Kenyans who remain at the KK Park on the border of Myanmar and Thailand are calling on the government to expedite the repatriation process, saying their living conditions are deteriorating with each passing day.
Nilikuja hapa nililetwa na agent kwa mambo job ni gani tena naambia story na kuscam. I don't know anything with scam. Nilitry kusema staki kazi taniambia nilipe 4K USD of which nisikuwa nayo, so I was forced kufanya kazi.
The Kenyan embassy received another authenticated list of 36 Kenyans who are waiting for authorization from both Myanmar and Thailand governments to cross over. 77 more Kenyans are yet to start the process.
Bado hatuna any update of when tutaanza hii process ya kuenda immigration, kushughulikiwa at least tukuwe na hopes ya kwenda home, but we are hoping the government of Kenya will make it possible for all of us to get out of this horrible place.
Authorities from Thailand, China and Myanmar last month dismantled scam centers along the Thai-Myanmar border and freed thousands of foreigners, but repatriation is a challenge, especially for those that do not have embassies in Thailand. Emily Chebet, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
294 Super Metro Sacco public service vehicles spent the better part of today at the NTSA Inspection Center on Likoni Road, where more than 250 matatus underwent examination afresh to determine if they meet the regulatory standards. This development comes just 2 days after the revocation of Super Metro's operating license following allegations of passenger mishandling during a fare dispute, which resulted in a passenger's death. O'Day Francis brings us the latest from the inspection center.
The NTSA Inspection Center on Likoni Road was a hive of activity as Super Metro vehicles lined up for inspection. More than 250 vehicles had been brought here, one by one. The matatus were subjected to detailed check as NTSA officials scrutinized their compliance with safety regulations. Among the areas of focus were bodywork, speed limiters, safety belts, and overall mechanical soundness. This follows a government directive through the traffic commandant warning of potential seizure of the SACCO's vehicles if found on the road.
Kitu yenye hatukuwa tumetarajia. Juu hatukuwa tunatarajia tunaweza kuja hapa wote ati tumekuja inspection na magari mengi zetu siko sawa.
Wanasema gari zetu hasina governor, hasina maparua ya nini yote NTSA. Sasa sisi tumekuja hapa kuhakikisha kuona kama hizo gari siko naye.
The number of vehicles inspected today reached 250 compared to the 12 inspected yesterday. Drivers argue that while the government has the right to enforce road safety, the process should be conducted systematically across the sector.
I think as drivers and conductors, and even maybe our company, they could have told us, if we have like 600 buses, let's say like we bring 200 this week, so that we can continue working and carrying our customers. Now when you bring the whole lot here, it is a little bit unfair because you can see like now nobody is operating. Yeah, our pockets have nothing. We can't give our families anything.
The Super Metro management saying the matter of the death of a passenger who had been traveling in one of their buses was being dealt with through the right channels.
Huyo makanga ambaye amepotea. Kawaida ya mambo ya matatu, wewe hujui mahali ameenda. Vile tunafanyaga sisi, tunachukuaga hiyo file na picha ya mtu, tunaipelekea polisi. Hiyo ni kazi ya polisi wakatafuta hiyo mtu. Mimi siwezi hata nikimwona pale siwezi kumshika.
They claim their struggles are driven by unseen forces. Although inspections are ongoing, Super Metro management demands fairness in regulating all SACCOs nationwide.
Ikiwa level hiyo wanataka tupitie hiyo level, let it be seen even to the other SACCOs tutafuata. Na ikiwa iko makosa tutakuwa sisi tukitaja bwana hii SACCO inafanya hivi ya mchukui hatua. Ndio iwe sasa ile level mumeweka ya Kenya tuifanyie hivyo.
It is the second day of inspection on Super Metro buses at Likoni Road, that is NTSA Inspection Center. Now, after this inspection, NTSA will give its report on whether to give back the license to Super Metro or not. Ode Francis, Citizen TV, Likoni Road, NTSA Inspection Center, Nairobi.
Public Service Cabinet Secretary Justin Muturi has hinted at not accompanying the President, William Ruto, on his scheduled tour of the Mount Kenya region. Speaking after a meeting with a section of Kikuyu elders in Kiambu County, the Cabinet Secretary called on the region to be united and embrace culture and tradition, which he says are the backbone of all origins in the country.
I don't just follow the President. Even when Uhuru was president, it was never my practice or habit to follow him wherever he went, because you know, as a president, he has a schedule of work. I also have a schedule, my schedule of work when I was a speaker and even now. So unless it's something that touches the ministry that I'm in, I have no business trooping around to follow the president.
Residents of Nairobi's Jericho estate are demanding clarity over a piece of land at the heart of a dispute. The residents are calling on the Nairobi County government to provide clear documentation regarding the ownership and use of the piece of land, which the Eastlands Muslim community says it was allocated in 2007. According to the chairman, Jericho Estate, Wambua Munguti, the land is a green space where children play and any change of use must be officially communicated. The Eastland Muslim community maintains it has a valid allotment letter and is only waiting for a title deed.
2007 stakabadhi niko nazo. Uwanja ulikuwa wetu kwanza, ulikuwa ule, lakini waliokuwa mahakamani, waliokuwa mamlakani wakati huo wakabadilisha, wakatupatia document turithi huu. Sasa huu uwanja ndio wetu.
Sisi tunataka tuletee stakabadhi ya kuonesha change of usage, kwa sababu ikiwa hii ilikuwa playground, sheria inasema kama unataka kubadilisha property yako lazima ufanye application inaitwa change of service. Hiyo change of service kutoka kwa playground ya watoto into a religious faith organization iko wapi?
We take a break on Citizen Weekend, but as promised, that conversation on the security situation in the region. We'll be joined by Dr. Fatma Ahmed Ali, who is an Associate Professor of International Relations and the Director of the Horn Institute, none other than Hassan Kanenje. Conflict in Sudan, South Sudan, Somalia, DR Congo. We are discussing a region in crisis after this break.
Vaseline is the only petroleum jelly with a unique triple purification seal, meaning it is safe to use on all skin types, including sensitive skin, and has been clinically tested and dermatologically certified to be free of allergens or irritants and does not block pores. Use Vaseline because it is the first step to maintaining natural, healthy skin.
Pepsodent is aware that globally 1 in 2 children suffer from cavities. Give her Pepsodent. It repairs tiny holes and forms a protective layer for maximum cavity protection, so she can grow up with a confident smile. Every smile matters.
Our bodies are sustained by nature's endless gifts. From the food we eat to the air we breathe, the vitamins and minerals strengthen us, helping us glow and thrive. Introducing Vitamin N for nature. Give your skin a daily dose of Vitamin N. Experience Amara Skincare. Packed with Vitamin N. Amara. Embrace nature.
The Smarter Bundle. Bundle imetosha. 30 GB monthly data. 400 minutes talk time to any network. 100% rudishiwa on Airtel Money transactions, bank to wallet, pay bills, and agent withdrawals. Subscribe to the Smarter Bundle today. Dial *544# or visit My Airtel app. Airtel Smarter Bundle. Browse, chat, call. Airtel Money. Airtel. A reason to imagine.
Get business credit card from Cooperative Bank and pay for business stock and supplies on credit instead of using your own money. You can make payments in Kenya, abroad, and online.
Since 2012, Al Khair Foundation has provided Ramadan food packs to more than 530,000 fasting Muslims in need across Kenya.
As you fast, you get to remember those who struggle to find a basic meal to break their fast.
Donate today and make a difference.
I want to quit.
Quit what?
Marriage, my work, life.
Finally, you're home. Please sit down, son.
Kila safari huanza na ndoto. As we celebrate 40 years, our promise is to be with you for life. Tufanikishe zaidi.
Thank you for staying with us on Citizen Weekend. As promised, and I'm now joined by Dr. Hassan Kanenje, who's joining us virtually. And in studio, I have Dr. Fatma Ahmed Ali, who is an Associate Professor of International Relations. Together with them, we'll be taking a look at the security situation in the region. But as we do that, let us set the stage. We begin with Somalia, where on March the 18th, there was a bomb attack on the presidential motorcade in Mogadishu. And just the very next day, that is on the 19th of March, there were mortar after attacks on Mogadishu's Aden Abdullah International Airport and the Halane base camp, which hosts UN staff, and that was on the 19th of March. Let's now take a look at the situation in South Sudan, and we begin with the conflict that we've been witnessing in the western part of the country, where Kir and Machar forces have clashed in western Equatoria. And aside from that, there has been conflict in the north of Sudan. Fighting between Kir forces and the Nuer, quote-unquote, White Army has broken out. This was on February the 14th, as you see there. And in response, a Machar ally general and the petroleum minister were arrested, and we saw Machar's residence surrounded by Kir forces. And Uganda has gone in, and they confirmed sending troops to Juba on March the 10th. Let's now take a look at the situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And we go a little bit farther back than that monumental meeting between President Felix Tshisekedi and Paul Kagame. We begin with the EU sanctions that were placed on Rwandan generals and M23 rebel leaders. This was on March the 17th. There was an immediate response from the M23 and the Congo River Alliance. They reconsidered their participation in peace talks that were to be held in Luanda. And in addition to this, Rwanda broke diplomatic ties with Belgium. And it was after all this that we saw that meeting between President Felix Tshisekedi and Paul Kagame face-to-face in Qatar. I will start with you, Dr. Fatma. How significant, in your view, was that meeting? They talked about upholding a ceasefire. Is it a turning point in the conflict?
Good evening, Olive, and thank you for having me. I think it's important, the kind of event that has occurred. One thing to note is that I know most people are feeling surprised to see Qatar mediating, but they should know that Qatar has a leverage, and this leverage is the good economic ties that it has both with Rwanda and DRC Congo. And I think also having a country like Qatar, which does not seem to project, what Tshisekedi was refusing, to attend the East African Community meeting, the SADC meeting, with the fear that, there are interest or transactional interest from the leaders within the region. In this case, the transactional interest is already there in terms of partnership. And if you look at this event, is quite interesting in the sense that probably this is what is needed, when you have a country that can leverage, its ties, especially the trade that it has. For instance, Rwanda, Qatar has 49% stake with the Rwanda Air, and 60% with a new international airport that Rwanda is building just outside Kigali. So these are also very important. It means that they have trust. Both countries enjoy trust and good relations with Qatar, and that's why they were able to meet after a year, face to face, and have a joint agreement. Now, the only thing to watch is just immediately the next day, M23 captured another city. And I think M23, from my analysis, I would say that they know they will go to the table with the government of DRC, but they want to go to that table very strong, so they can have a good negotiation. Because if they are weak, then at the end of the day, they will not get what they really want. Right. So I think despite the peace truce between the two leaders, you saw they did that. And I think this is to send a message that by the time they come to the table, they're strong enough to be able to negotiate with the government.
All right, Dr. Kanenje, let me bring you in at that point. Some media outlets described the meeting between President Felix Tshisekedi and Paul Kagame as a surprise. Was it a surprise to you?
I think it was a surprise to the extent that what people are actually looking at is the Luanda talks and the fact that M23 had just pulled out of those talks. Even Angola itself was surprised that actually the talks were taking place in Doha. So it appears they were not exactly consulted with that. However, it was very clear that the only way forward was for the two leaders to actually meet, because these are the two main players in the conflict. And so while the timing of it was surprising, the event itself was not surprising.
Okay, I read that the U.S. was among the players that were pulling the strings behind the scenes, because I saw later President Kagame meet some U.S. representatives.
Both countries have a decent relation with the United States, and the U.S. is a keen player and a country with a keen interest, of course. In recent days, you've seen Tshisekedi even make certain offers to the United States. And so you'll expect that they're going to play a role, especially using Qatar as a country that has built its reputation as a mediator between warring parties, not just on the continent, but actually outside. And so it is expected the U.S. is going to remain engaged. And I think it's telling that among the sanctions that were, of course, imposed, the U.S. is missing in action, which tells you, I think, they do not want to muddy the waters, and they want to maintain an agency with regard to playing a role in the resolution of that conflict.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, Dr. Fatma Ahmed. The M23 was not represented at that table, at that meeting. Are we saying that Kagame speaks for M23 because they talked about upholding a ceasefire?
I wouldn't want to directly say that, but I think also it's quite important because it's one of the supporters, of M23. And that's why, as Dr. Kanenje has said, I think having Kagame is also very important. I think also if you look at the history of the conflict, this conflict stems from Rwanda. So Rwanda has to be on the table, whether it's directly supporting or involved in M23, because that is the root causes. That is where the point should start from, like solving that conflict in the first place. And I think also M23, even though there is that relation with Rwanda, but they also have their own agency, they also have their own interest, and it's clear with what they did the next day, capturing a town. And I think for them is as long as they capture all these mineral-rich towns, then that also gives them leverage in terms of negotiation. So, and I think it's very clear the kind of relationship that Rwanda has with M23 and the historical ties, of that conflict to Rwanda and, of course, to the M23 as well.
All right. Dr. Kanenje, there was a point made by Rwanda immediately following that meeting, and that the EAC SADC, even in the joint statement, is summit or engagement process is the primary mechanism for these peace negotiations and talks. They're the driving force. But what does it say that Qatar was able to bring these two people within the same space physically, and that the EAC and SADC have failed to do so?
Yes. SADC and EAC, they face challenges in part because, one, personality differences, two, some competing and conflicting interests, and three, frankly, a degree of lack of trust, especially from Kinshasa, for these two bodies to be able to, engineer some kind of a mediation process that is going to be, acceptable. Now, Doha has ties with both countries. Doha is heavily invested in both countries and has an interest to develop that type of engagement. But considering its perception of neutrality and its success in diplomacy, especially in mediation, I think it was probably one of the ideal, centers to be able to convene that. But these are efforts, of course, that are going to be done within the framework of both SADC as well as EAC. There is a recognition even by the African Union that only a local African solution is going to do that. Because even if Qatar, for instance, were to be successful, there are certain guarantees that it cannot offer in the absence of regional countries and regional framework. Why? Because regional countries are involved, either directly or indirectly, either as a problem or solution to the conflict in DRC.
Is this a turning point in the conflict, in your view, Dr. Kanenje?
It may not be a turning point, but it's an added layer in mediation efforts, and it's an added and a welcome layer in mediation efforts, in part because of the credibility that is brought about by Doha and the success and the experience that comes with that. And perhaps to the extent that the two main protagonists are meeting, it is actually something that I think points to a brighter future. However, we can't say it's a significant turning point, but we can say it is a very welcome added layer to the peace efforts in Eastern DRC especially.
All right. Is it a breakthrough, Dr. Fatma Ahmed Ali?
I think it's an opportunity for the East African community and SADC to take this chance and create something, a framework that can work for both countries. And this also, I think, with the role that Qatar has already played by bringing the two countries together, that, as Dr. Kanenje said, it's not a turning point, but it's an opportunity. And I think it's an opportunity that has come timely, considering the situation in the region. And of course, the spillover that is about to happen, with the neighboring countries as well. So I think this also gives the region, like the two main organs of the region, the East African community and SADC, to immediately, start doing something. And of course, Angola, that is one of the main mediators, to also kind of think very quickly and a very innovative way how to come in and facilitate peace negotiation that brings the M23 on the table.
Because Rwanda, in the presidential statement right after, held its ground. It said the FDLR has to be addressed. It maintained what its issues are. Do you think these were discussed behind the scenes and maybe it was just not made public? Also some of these, first meetings, not everything is discussed. So it's just a matter of just creating the cordial appearance, and after a long silence and distrust. So I think later on we are going to see how things will unfold, especially with how it's received and who will take what responsibility. All right. There's actually something significant I did not touch on, Dr. Kanenje, if you don't mind, on the DRC. Rwanda breaking ties with Belgium after those, or in response, as it has been printed, to those EU sanctions.
Yeah, the Rwanda-Belgium relationship has been toxic. It's a love-hate relationship, I think, for many, many years. It has a checkered history with both Rwanda as well as DRC. Now, it is not surprising that Kigali moved to break off relations, because at the urging of Belgium, the EU moved to impose sanctions on some of the M23 operatives, as well as some senior commanders within the Rwanda military. And I think Rwanda took it very personally, considering the grudge that Rwanda still holds by accusing actually Belgium to having been complicit in the Rwandan genocide in 1994. And so it's not surprising that Rwanda has proceeded to do this, I think, as to make a powerful statement and an indictment of Belgium generally within the Rwandan political discourse, but also to communicate to the rest of the continent that perhaps, Belgium is not as clean as perhaps they may want to present themselves.
Anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, so I think also it's a message to the EU as well. I think Kagame is a very kind of a transparent, clear leader. And I think also by doing that, it's also a message to the EU, where Belgium is the headquarters of the European Union, So this is also another political statement to also the European Union, the fact that they've gone ahead and actually tried to put a sanction because they are supporting and a way of deterring Rwanda for supporting M23. So I think it was a very clear message,
But the EU also made a very strong statement in the sanctions because, that list also had, I think, a Rwandan gold mining firm as well as a board and the CEO of the board. And they talked about we are sanctioning these individuals and these entities because they are fueling the conflict for illicit trade. And of course, the minerals in the DRC then comes to mind. Yeah. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think the center of this conflict is the minerals. It has a lot to do, and that's why you see it's super confusing to even map out the actors, to map out the reasons, to map out the dynamics. And I think also EU maybe thinks if they do that, that will also maybe help, in the situation. But I think Rwanda, as was mentioned, took it personally, and also I think also it's because of that tension that they've had for a long time. Of course, the colonial relations with Belgium, and of course, just sending a message to Belgium and to EU. This is also a political statement to say that you cannot interfere with these affairs, even though this is done from a human rights perspective.
All right. Dr. Kanenje, let me move us a bit further up north, South Sudan. Should we be concerned that South Sudan could slide into another civil war?
Olive, South Sudan, it is indeed, a tragic story. It is the youngest baby on the continent, but it just appears to have been born with measles and so many other ailments. And, we've been trying to fix it for a number of years. Now, following the revitalized agreement, I think there was expectation that actually by now you could actually have worked onto the elections as well as other aspects of that agreement. Of course, that did not work. Now, the process was taking place in Nairobi, the Tumaini Initiative. We hoped that it was going to offer some direction and some light towards, a final consensus and where South Sudan is going to move on. Now, I think we're all aware that the suspension of Tumaini kind of removed some of that hope of getting back South Sudan back, to right path. And so the fear, I think, is potential disintegration and an all-out war between not just the factions of Riek Machar and Salva Kiir, but other warring factions within Southern Sudan. Remember, they are actually numerous, factions, all of them who, which are armed. And so there is a real danger of getting back, to a place in 2013, for instance, when things really got out of hand. And I think the responsibility for regional countries is to try and move in and arrest that situation and bring the parties back to a negotiating table. Because failure to do that at the time when the entire Horn of Africa region is in a state of flux and conflict-ridden, I think is going to be extremely dangerous, and we may be staring into an abyss that perhaps may be very, very hard to come out of if something is not done urgently and immediately.
Mm-hmm. Your thoughts, Dr. Fatma Ahmed, should we be concerned about a possible slide back into civil war?
Yeah, yes, definitely we should be concerned. And I think also it's not only that, but also you have to realize that also the spillover from Sudan is also another factor. So this, even though it's a new baby, but this is a new baby that was born from another state. And also there's a lot of ties, a lot of connection. As you know that Sudan, one of the biggest resources they have is their petroleum, which they actually use the pipes through Sudan to make their money. Now that is not there. Also there's a distrust, then the economical stress that is there. And of course, the fact that everybody has a military, standing military, also is another factor that actually fuels. And I think in Sudan, war is not a new event. This is a country that has been fighting over 50 years. And even from the time it is born, right? It is born right from the ashes of the war between them and the North. And that's why I think this is a very critical moment for both IGAD, AU, all the actors that have been helping, even Kenya itself, that, we've been always concerned because they are our neighbors and because of our policy of good neighborly. And I think we always want to enjoy being in a very peaceful environment. We shouldn't just watch and see this unfolding and then seeing how the two leaders confront each other with their military. I think there is need to really intervene very quickly because this might really go out of hand. And I think this time it will be even difficult to return because of the kind of distrust and, how do you say, a little bit of bad feelings, being held over. And I think this is also something that has really been going on between the leaders since the day they were in the bush, So it's like been building up. So it's going to be like an explosion, a time bomb. And that's why I think it's really critical to really not wait and see. And I guess also in this region, countries have to be very careful when they intervene, not to be seen that they're taking sides or they are already. And I think we've learned from West Africa when other countries went into other countries to bring peace, and this really backfired. And I think that is what we are going to head into when we are not using a peaceful mechanism. Then it might backfire into even breeding more violence, within that country.
Okay. Yeah. Dr. Kanenje, because something that Dr. Fatma Ahmed has said that is actually interesting to me is she has said countries have to be careful when they intervene not to be seen to be taking sides. Uganda has been very clear that Kiir is our man. Your thoughts?
Yes, Kampala, I think, has is very decidedly, partisan when it comes to the Sudan conflict. And they've been siding with Kiir, for many, many years. Before that, of course, it was the SPLM, under Garang. But the first major intervention you saw, happening in 2013 when there was that outbreak of the first, civil war within, South Sudan. And they've continued to do that. Of course, that type of intervention sometimes fuels the conflict further, even though it may strengthen one party, and in this case, it's going to strengthen, of course, it's meant to strengthen Salva Kiir. But then that does not bode well when it comes to regional mechanisms to resolve that conflict, because when the region itself is divided or has competing interests, or conflicting interests within it, then that intervention is not going to be trusted. And so the parties to the conflict are not going to trust. And that explains why some of these peace processes have actually failed. A lot of it because of the perception that some of the countries that are involved, they already have partisan interests. Of course, we know Uganda has economic interests, but there's also a fear of the refugee crisis, on its border. But even then, I think the extent to which some of the countries have been involved in have not really been contributing to the neutral efforts to find a lasting solution in South Sudan. And so that intervention that is partisan is exactly not helpful. However, we can appreciate some of the concerns of neighboring countries such as Uganda to make sure that the conflict does not spill onto its territory.
All right, quickly, Dr. Fatma Ahmed Ali, your last word on Somalia. How worried should we be? Is this attack on the presidential motorcade out of the ordinary and therefore should signal or ring alarm bells?
I think the recent event that has happened in Somalia is quite alarming, and it's not something that we should just watch and just think, okay, it's ordinary. If you look at these two events, it speaks a lot about the strategy that Al-Shabaab has. One, the fact that they attempted an assassination on the president. Secondly, they attacked the airport when another leader is visiting the country, and of course the safest place in Mogadishu, which is the Halana airport. And this is also jeopardized a lot the stability of the Third Republic of Somalia. And not only that, but I think also they're taking advantage of the situation. One being the center-periphery conflict between, or tension between the member states and the federal state, especially with Puntland and Jubaland. So I think because the government is preoccupied with its own tension with its member state, so they are also taking advantage of that. Secondly, they're taking advantage because of the transition with the African Union mission. Now we have a new mission, and they know that this mission will not be approved tomorrow or today until May, when the Security Council meets to vote. And there, the United States is going to sit there and probably will not even allow or give fund. And secondly, also the U.S. foreign policy doesn't seem to come to really pay attention I mean, they know that there's a diminishing interest from the international partners that Somalia used to have. For instance, you know that Somalia benefited a lot from the U.S. relation because the special forces, which was the game changer in the fight against Al-Shabaab in 2023, is not going to receive as much attention. And of course, even the AMISOM, the new African Union mission, when it is renewed, it's not going to enjoy, protect as it used to. Now it's going to go down to 20 to 30, as before it was 50. So I think this is also one of the things that, Al-Shabaab is already seeing, these gaps, and is taking advantage. And I think they're thinking this is the moment, now or never. And I think the strategy is different. They are not just doing to attack and whatever. Now it looks like they really want to go to the capital because they're really demonstrating their capability of large-scale attacks, towards the capital and different places. So I think they're also realizing the gap, the weakness of the government at the moment, the lack of paying attention, and also the divided attention that the government has, because it has to have its own challenges. The opposition are also there demanding also the kind of initiative that the president wants to do is not in dialogue with everyone. Like the universal suffrage. Somalia is going to go soon into the district elections, and there are some people who are making an argument and say, wait a minute, we're not ready for that. Let's go by the 2010 electoral law. Let's use the 2012 constitution. And the president seemed to be very adamant into leaving a legacy or reviving himself for another term. And I think all this also is what is giving Al-Shabaab now the opportunity. And I think this is a risk for the Third Republic of Somalia and the government of Hassan Sheikh.
Okay. There's a lot there to unpack, but we will have to dedicate a day for it. I want to thank Dr. Hassan Kanenje for joining us this evening, and you as well, Dr. Fatma Ahmed Ali. We take a break, but Citizen Weekend continues on the other side.